Within 80 years, Japan moved from an insular and isolated country to a major world power, holding immense influence over events in the 20th century and becoming one of the few great powers that determined the fate of the world. As Emperor Taisho brought about a new, albeit short era from 1912 to 1926, greater democratic institutions were put in place, bolstering Japan's standing on the international scale. Japan aligned with the Allied forces during the First World War and took advantage of the global distraction to further expand its sphere of influence throughout China and the Pacific. This led to significant economic growth and the opportunity to claim new colonies in the South Pacific from Germany after the conclusion of the war. During the years after the First World War, Japan benefited from the misfortune of Western countries. Capitalist countries of the West faced a global economic crisis that deepened rifts in society and threatened existing institutions, turning attention inwards to domestic issues. This gave Japan the freedom to focus on industrialization, militarization, and colonization unhindered. During the 1920s, there was a significant increase in Japanese patriotism, which was primarily influenced by a national army that saw itself as an independent agent of the imperial state.
The 1930s and the 1940s saw growing resentment among the armed forces in response to budget cuts and further restrictions enforced by the government, which led to the increase of right-wing militarization. Within civilian population, the influence of state-run anti-West propaganda bred the idea that the Western political idea was exploitative, hegemonistic, and aggressive, essentially a contagious plague that had infected insular Japan. Between 1934 and 1936, right-wing fascist leadership led the development of policy of total war, increasing economic growth and the transformation of Japan into a military state. This accompanies the proliferation of a domestic intensification of propaganda and indoctrination, ultranationalism, and the continued repression of the radical left, laying the foundation for Japan's role in Second World War. Wilcox described indoctrination as an emotive concept to denote a process regarded as manipulative and undesirable, usually associated with instilling, inculcating, moralizing, imposing, and brainwashing. Children are particularly susceptible to propaganda and indoctrination due to their developing mind and personality and inherent trust in authority figures. In 1935, children constitute 63% of Japan's population. During the Second World War, it was necessary to justify action, promote nationhood, and integrate children into the conflict.
Benedict Anderson conceptualizes nationalism and nationhood as relating more to kinship than fascism, explaining how bonds between members of a nation are formed. He defines a nation as an imagined political community. This social constructivist view posits that communal bonds and comradeship between citizens are imagined because they are larger than face-to-face communities. Cinema enables members of a nation to share the same experience through mass media, allowing leaders to model nationalism based on prior experiences, contributing to the formation of a shared national identity and a sense of nationhood. Anderson concludes that 20th century identifications with nationhood become inseparable from political consciousness and exists the possibility of Japanese fascism in creating a sense of nationhood through anime. The clip Toy Box Series 3, Picture Book 1936 is an example of how a sense of nationhood is instilled in Japanese children. The clip contains numerous myths where baths argue that it affects individuals and how they interpret media messages when referring to cultural contexts because it becomes naturalized, serving powerful interests and ideologies. The building of myths demonstrates the wish by political leaders in Japan to instill in children a political consciousness, making them aware of where they fit into the discourse as depicted on screen. Herman and Chomsky also proposed the conception of the propaganda model, where the increase in propaganda found in the media arises from the concentration of media ownership, resulting in implications on media content. The anime Toy Box Series 3 is filled with propaganda themes such as kokutai, putting the nation before the self, which contributed to Japan's distinctive national identity, Bushido, the idea of dying in war as purifying, and making soldiers fight until the end, and lastly, anti-Western sentiments.
Toy Box Series 3 features components of a number of Japanese myths. For example, Momotaro, Kintaro, and Isunboshi are examples of how children's literature has been manipulated by political elites to serve a propagandistic function and are cast as protagonists. The general background of the three heroes in this clip involves their home being attacked, colonized by others, and lastly, achieving victory through moral virtue tied to the imperial institution, using the Japanese folklore hero Momotaro to represent the Bushido or the samurai spirit in propaganda. In the story, evil Mickey represents the anti-Western propaganda because of the cultural symbolism of America attached to Mickey Mouse. Folklore introduced to children builds the foundations for race, ethnicity, and nationhood. Children become susceptible to the attempt of acculturation by political elites, making the anime relatable to the children. Drawing on folklore and myths as pre-existing cultural symbols signifies the sense of nationhood that Japan was trying to teach to young children by instilling in them the values of kokutai, bushido, and anti-Western sentiments. The anime as a propaganda manufactured by political elites provided sufficient information in a simple, relatable way for the children. Fascism, along with frequently used propaganda campaigns and slogans, become embedded in cultural works such as Toy Box Series 3 and are naturalized in the myths told through folklore, also relying on the communal bonds felt by children as part of Japan's imagined community where nationhood is indoctrinated in social reality and is maintained by film viewing by children. Toy Box Series 3 promoted cultural beliefs and enabled children to form a sense of nationhood. It strengthened youth morale and the perception that the Japanese Empire would succeed against the dominant ideologies of the West. Therefore, film demonstrates the dual purposes of fascism in the attempt to create a sense of nationhood through normative engagement. Film can shape popular opinion through nationalism or uses nationalism to mold children through myths.
In McLuhan's words, can it be understood that the medium is the message? Film influences beliefs, attitudes, and values of young children and allows the development of communal bonds and a sense of nationhood. Political elites become successful in the retelling of an evil Mickey that is America, and this myth becomes naturalized as it is repeated through a shared culture which emphasizes loyalty, nationhood, and historical obligation in young children. Political elites indoctrinate children with a sense of nationhood, carefully manufactured with specific intentions, patriotic loyalty, which can be translated into quantifiable soldiers that can aid in the war effort.